Go forth, young Blossom. In a single, graceful motion, Blossomforth unrolled her stretching mat and laid it on her living room floor. She stepped onto it, relishing the familiar feel of the mat, giving ever so slightly under her hooves, and took a seat in the center. For a moment, she simply sat, breathing deeply and trying to center herself. Sunlight poured in through the open window, carrying it the scent of her flower garden just outside. She filled her lungs with the fragrance, then discharged it in a happy exhale, smiling contentedly into her quiet, cozy home. Then she started. For as long as she could remember, Blossomforth had stretched every single day, the result, of course, being the flexibility she was known for among her friends and co-workers. She couldn't remember why she started the tradition all those years ago. All she knew was that it relaxed her and made her body feel more alive. By now, the routine was mostly second nature, and she went through her various stretches and exercises mostly on autopilot. Hence, another one of the tradition's benefits. It gave her time to think, to ponder, and contemplate. As she planted her hind hooves on the mat and rotated her torso nearly 180 degrees so that she was facing the opposite direction, she decided to have some daffodil affredo for supper. As she lowered herself into the splits and reached forward along her front legs, she wondered if there were any good movies showing at the Ponyville Theater. And she raised herself up into a bridge, extending her belly towards the ceiling with all her 4 hooves on the mat beneath her, stretching her back until her spine gave a few satisfying pops. She tried to recall how hectic tomorrow's weather schedule was supposed to be, and thoughts of work, as often they did, brought something else to her mind, or rather, some pony else. Him, Thunderlane, her full-hood friend and longtime crush. With a sigh, she bent her back further, curling her head underneath her until her chin came to rest on the mat, then lowered herself until she felt her own rump sitting on her head. Oh, Thunderlane, if only he knew! If only he knew how much Blossomforth thought about him, dreamed about him. If only he knew how much he imagined him touching her, holding her, caressing her. And so much more. Naughty, depraved things that he would never expect from his sweet and innocent friend. And maybe he would know. If only Blossomforth had the nerve to tell him. She rolled out of her extreme back end and lay flat on the floor, staring at the ceiling. The momentum of her routine was thoroughly shattered by that entire train of thought, and by the warm, tingly feeling between her legs. Getting turned on during her stretching sessions wasn't such an uncommon thing, perhaps due to some inherent sensuality in contorting one's body on the floor. Nor was it entirely unwelcome, for though it was undoubtedly an interruption to her beloved routine, there were, after all, other ways to relax. And so, with thoughts of Thunderlane still fresh in her mind, her hoof began to wander, inch by inch, down her body, and finally between her legs. A sudden inhale through her nostrils accompanied the first contact, and a moan the second. Soon enough, she settled into a rhythm, rubbing herself in slow, steady circular motions, biting her lips to cut off another moan. Her wings slowly, surely stiffened against the stretching mat, and her left leg as per usual, gave tiny twitches. She closed her eyes and let fantasy wash over her. It was no longer her own hoof between her legs. It was Thunderlane's. He rubbed and rubbed at her swollen slit, his body poised over her prone form like a predator over his kill. Her other hoof was also his as it ran over her body, from her face, down her belly, across her inner thigh, along the length of her wings. As the speed of her hoof increased, so did her pleasure, until finally Blossomforth opened her mouth, panting and whimpering into her normal, peaceful living room. In her mind, Thunderlane began to move down her body, positioning himself between her legs and licking her pussy with his strong, broad tongue. She moaned more because of the thought of being licked than the actual sensation between her legs. Unfortunately, hooves were not exactly designed for masturbation, and even if Blossomforth, like most ponies, could usually make do, it paled in comparison to an actual tongue wriggling through her folds. With a frustrated huff, she withdrew her hoof and opened her eyes. The fantasy of Thunderlane dispelled like a puff of smoke in the wind. Her mind drifted to her modest collection of dildos and vibrators, stowed in a small box under her bed. Even they, however, seemed a poor substitute for what she wanted. She was more in the mood for being eaten out than rutted, and there simply wasn't anything that would properly imitate a real, living tongue. Oh, what she wouldn't give to have Thunderlane there, or any pony really. As horny as she wasn't picky. Heck, if she could eat herself out, she would. She bolted upright on the mat. Lowering her eyes, she gave her marehood a curious, appraising look. What if she could do it herself? After all her years stretching and contorting, she was the most flexible pony she knew. If any pony could do it, it would be her.
Hey, sorry about this, but my videos have been condemned by YouTube and they have placed a limit on the length of the video, capping at 15 minutes. I hate to do this, but if you would like to listen to the next part, you can either click the annotation on the screen or click the link in the description for mobile users. Real sorry about this, but what can I do? See you there.